There are moments in baseball that feel less like transactions and more like tectonic shifts, ruptures that reveal the true character of a franchise. When the Los Angeles Dodgers reached across the Pacific and signed Munetaka Murakami, it did far more than change a roster. It exposed a widening structural gap in modern baseball between teams that build empires and teams that tinker around the edges. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. watched that signing from Toronto, and what it triggered was not simply disappointment. It was the recognition that his window and his team's identity were under threat. Murakami's numbers in Nippon Professional Baseball read like a thesis on elite production: a .312 batting average, 42 home runs, a 1.050 OPS, and eye-popping age-adjusted metrics that projected into MLB as roughly 5 WAR per season. His approach at the plate combined power with patience, walk rates, and chase rates that indicate pitch recognition advanced beyond his years. Scouts called him a generational talent whose arrival would reconfigure lineup constructions across the American League. The Blue Jays scouted him relentlessly. Their analytics teams modeled scenarios. Murakami batting behind Vladimir would lift opposing managers out of their comfort zones, increase Guerrero's on-base opportunities, and shift late-game decisions. Multiple projection systems calculated a near-term boost of 3 to 5 wins for Toronto with Murakami in the lineup, an impact large enough to change playoff probabilities in a league where fractional margins decide October dreams. Those spreadsheets were not fantasies. They were the calculus of teams that understand how marginal gains compound into seasons. But the Dodgers brought an architect's plan. They were not buying an individual performance profile. They were buying a cultural axis. Pairing Murakami with Shohei Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto created an Eastern Hemisphere constellation rarely imagined in baseball. 2 Japanese superstars and 1 transcendent two-way talent, aligned in a single market with the broadcast and merchandising infrastructure to amplify their reach. Ohtani alone had already shifted viewing patterns in Japan. Late-night ratings spiked by 30 to 50% when he pitched or hit. Add Murakami to that constellation, and you multiply media rights value, sponsorship demand, and global merchandising. The Dodgers' offer therefore extended beyond dollars. It offered Murakami a platform, a guaranteed international narrative, and an opportunity to grow into a global figure overnight. The Blue Jays could match salary to an extent, but they could not deliver the same guarantee of transnational exposure and commercial ascent. For Guerrero, the moment felt intimate. He is not merely a productive player, he is the franchise heartbeat in Toronto. Over the past 3 seasons, his 133 WRC+ and consistent barrel rates established him as one of the American League's most dangerous hitters in terms of run creation. Yet the context around those numbers often undermined their weight. Toronto's lineup has lacked reliable protection and situational consistency. Last season, the club posted 89 wins, yet their aggregate runs scored lagged because the lineup lacked the kind of protection that forces pitchers to attack instead of avoid. Murakami's left-handed power would have solved more than matchups. It would have altered in-game strategy, pitch sequencing, and bullpen usage against the Jays. In short, it would have changed outcomes, not through subtle coaching adjustments, but by altering the calculus opposing managers used on every pitch. Timing matters. The American League East today is a pressure cooker. Baltimore's prospect base is maturing into a perennial contender. The Yankees have retooled around Judge and Soto. Tampa Bay remains a run suppression machine that refuses to be overwhelmed by peril. Boston is quietly assembling talent. In that environment, a 3 to 5 win improvement is the difference between a competitive autumn and an off-season of regret. The Jays needed Murakami to keep pace with an arms race that is increasingly decided off the field by international reach, media strategies, and guaranteed revenue streams. Losing him made the gap between Toronto and the league's deepest pockets feel permanently structural rather than merely cyclical. The Dodgers' organizational model amplifies these dynamics. Los Angeles has constructed a global scouting apparatus, an aggressive international marketing machine, and a willingness to treat the competitive balance tax as a manageable expense rather than a strategic curb. Their front office does not merely bid, it composes long-term symphonies, where pitching, hitting, and narrative align. That model produces inevitability. When the Dodgers want a player, they do not ask for permission, they execute. Toronto's ownership structure is different. Rogers Communications is a conglomerate with capital constraints, public responsibilities, and corporate timing that shape payroll decisions. Renovations, broadcast deals, and broader corporate priorities mean that the Blue Jays' spending operates within a matrix of non-baseball imperatives. That reality does not make the franchise less passionate, but it does make them more cautious in a marketplace that increasingly rewards boldness. Emotion followed. Guerrero's public comments were measured, professional statements about team focus and accountability. But in private, teammates and sources described a player whose patience is fraying. He had been promised upgrades in the offseason, and for months the front office hinted at a significant international move. The public hope turned private pressure when the Dodgers struck. For fans, the shift in mood was almost immediate. Ticket interest analytics that often rise with major acquisitions flattened. Social channels filled with disbelief and anger. For players, the message was crystalline. When super teams decide to accelerate, hesitation becomes a competitive handicap. Now, consider the roster calculus and the contract landscape. Guerrero will enter the pivotal arbitration years that lead into free agency. At age 27, he will command, in open market terms, a valuation that could approach $250 to $300 million for a generational hitter. Teams that pair financial muscle with a demonstrable roster construction plan will court him aggressively. If Toronto cannot show a trajectory to win in his prime, the leverage that anchors superstars shifts decisively away from the club. The economics are blunt. In an era of expanded broadcasting and international revenue, stars can monetize their peak in ways that make loyalty conditional on the franchise's trajectory. Beyond money, culture matters. Baseball is as much a social contract as a competitive one. Players seek environments that promise not only wins but meaning, opportunities to define eras, to be part of narratives that outlast stat lines. The Dodgers' pitch to Murakami was not only a salary but membership in a story that would be told across continents. That intangible has tangible results: higher merchandising, increased streaming rights, and a feedback loop that strengthens roster-building budgets. It's why certain franchises attract stars. They don't simply buy them, they offer them futures. If Toronto chooses to do nothing, risks multiply. The team's projection for the upcoming season, without Murakami, slides into the mid to high 80s in projected wins, a precarious place in a division that prizes density over parity. The more dangerous consequence is psychological. Players begin to internalize an identity as a franchise that gets close without finishing the job. That identity affects recruitment, affects trade conversations, and ultimately affects the patience of the very stars the club hopes to keep. Facing that fact, the Blue Jays have a choice. They can accelerate. They can push for creative trades that acquire the missing piece. They can leverage payroll flexibility to add complementary hitters or rotation depth, and they can aggressively pursue the next wave of international talent. They can change the narrative by acting decisively in the months that remain. Or they can continue on a path that values measured growth over aggressive transformation and hope that the chemistry of the present compensates for strategic shortcomings. What this moment makes clear is that baseball's power dynamics are in flux. Wealth alone does not guarantee dominance, but the strategic use of that wealth, paired with media sophistication and global scouting, produces an ecosystem where stars prefer to land where their prime will be multiplied. Guerrero's frustration is less about a single player lost and more about an institution that, until now, has wavered when decisive action mattered most. This is not failure writ large, but the kind of existential test that defines eras. To understand the scale, consider the economics at play. The Dodgers operate with a financial engine supported by a regional sports network valuation measured in the billions, repeated international sponsorship deals, and merchandise sales that spike whenever their marquee players make headlines. Ohtani's jersey sales alone accounted for an estimated double-digit percentage of MLB's global merchandise revenue in recent years. That kind of financial gravity enables Los Angeles to absorb competitive balance costs and structure offers that include marketing guarantees, international appearances, and synchronized brand campaigns. Rogers, by contrast, manages a portfolio that includes a national broadcaster, telecommunications obligations, and capital projects, and while it provides Toronto with significant resources, its priorities are more diffuse. That means the Jays must make choices, trade-offs between stadium investments, media rights, and the payroll needed to win a World Series. Those trade-offs play out on the field. When a franchise cannot promise the same degree of international exposure or guarantee the same long-term marketing rollout, certain players, especially international stars, gravitate toward markets that can amplify their careers. The calculus is economic, but the result is competitive. Consider also the psychological calculus of clubhouse leadership. Guerrero has performed as both a statistical engine and an emotional leader. His walk-up energy, his interactions with young prospects, and his presence in the community have made him more than a production line. He is a symbol. When a franchise star sees his organization struggle to seize historic opportunities, he senses not only competitive risk but also a fracture in the social compact between player and franchise. Locker rooms are ecosystems. Confidence spreads when management acts decisively. Doubt spreads when it hesitates. The Murakami episode accelerated a kind of institutional doubt among players who want certainty that their prime will be invested in, not merely rented. From a tactical standpoint, Murakami delivered value in ways that spreadsheets sometimes understate. His ability to turn on pitches and his opposite field power would have affected defensive alignments, pitch sequencing, and bullpen deployment by opponents. The downstream effects include more favorable matchups for Toronto's starting rotation, fewer double switches in late innings, and a higher leverage index in the home team's favor. In playoff baseball, those minute changes compound into decisive margins. One swing, one bullpen decision, one scored run that separates a dynasty from a footnote. Internationally, the cultural dynamics are also profound. Japanese media treat Otanis starts like national events. Adding Murakami to the same market does more than sell jerseys. It creates cross-border narratives, storylines about heritage, national pride, and generational succession that have long-term value. Spanish-language markets in the Caribbean and South America similarly react to Latin stars with immediacy. Guerrero's persona is as vital to the Blue Jays' regional appeal as any export. That duality, Japanese viewership and Latin American devotion, could have made Toronto a rare cross-cultural hub. Instead, Los Angeles expanded its own orbit. On the collective bargaining front, there are ripple effects. The MLB Players Association watches these dynamics closely because they affect leverage in negotiations about player rights, arbitration, and reputation protections. When teams that can spend without restraint consistently monopolize top-tier talent, the union must consider how to ensure competitive balance and protect player autonomy without strangling opportunity. Those macro-level conversations trickle down into off-season strategies and influence how clubs prioritize youth development versus splash signings. Suppose Toronto chooses to pivot now. There are concrete pathways, aggressive deadline trades for controllable power bats, leveraging prospects to secure established corner outfield help, restructuring contracts to free short-term payroll, or investing in a targeted media and marketing campaign that convinces international free agents that Toronto can deliver brand elevation comparable to LA. Each option carries risks, prospect depletion, short-term payroll spikes, or uncertain returns on marketing investments, but they are not impossible. Momentum, like runs, can be manufactured. The Jays can, if they decide, turn this setback into a catalytic moment by acting boldly and quickly. There are also structural considerations that complicate Toronto's calculus. Rogers Communications funds the franchise and has notable capital commitments, stadium work, broadcasting investments, corporate priorities that influence payroll flexibility. By contrast, the Dodgers operate with a revenue engine whose scale allows them to treat competitive balance taxes as mere line items rather than strategic obstacles. That gap in financial philosophy manifests on the field as decisiveness versus delay. When the league's richest organizations move, they produce ripples that rearrange priorities across the sport. Murakami's signing is one such ripple. Beyond spreadsheets and arbitration calendars, this story is about identity. Baseball has always been a sport where habit and institutional culture matter as much as payroll. The Dodgers have cultivated a culture of accumulation. They plan long range and act with relentless urgency. Toronto has cultivated a culture of prudence. They aim for sustainability and measured growth. Neither is inherently virtuous in all circumstances, but in a landscape where stars age and windows close, the cost of prudence becomes clearer. Guerrero's frustration is not merely ego. It is the reaction of a player who watches his prime erode in years that demand speed and certainty. He does not want to be the star who waits forever for a franchise to catch up. The narrative stakes are enormous. If the Jays answer with speed and conviction, they can reframe this season as the year they decided to match ambition with action. They can send a message not just to Guerrero but to every fan who packed the Rogers Center in hope. If they don't, history will record Murakami's signing as a cautionary tale, a pivotal moment when a franchise allowed the future to be chartered elsewhere. In the end, the story is direct. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a generational talent whose prime deserves a franchise willing to meet him at full speed. The Dodgers, in a